What happens when the quietest person in the room is also the one holding the blueprint? Evelyn Ward spent 8 years building the backbone of a billion-dollar neural tech system, only to be fired in a humiliating boardroom moment by a CEO who called her easily replaceable. No warning, no gratitude, just a cold dismissal in front of her team and silence. But when a mysterious call from the patent office arrived, mentioning Evelyn's name instead of the company's, the very system that tried to erase her began to unravel. How do you fight back when the theft isn't of money, but of identity? What do you do when your life's work is paraded under someone else's name? And more importantly, how do you rise without screaming? Stay with us through this emotional, true-to-life story of betrayal, silent strength, and one woman's brilliant return from corporate erasure. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you believe truth always finds its way back. Let's begin. The email subject line was simple: check in 2 p.m., 9th floor. No agenda, no details. Just that sterile vagueness that always felt like a corporate ambush wrapped in calendar etiquette. I almost didn't go. Thought about pretending to be sick, but I never once skipped a meeting in 11 years. When I stepped into conference room 9, the first thing I noticed was the lighting. The fluorescent tubes had a low, sickly buzz like a mosquito trapped in a jar. The second thing I noticed was Connor Ray's smile. He sat at the head of the table, hands folded with mathematical precision. The new CEO of Nova Kinetics, 6 months in, straight out of a VC-backed medtech firm that collapsed within a year. Sharp suit, sharper ambition. "Evelyn," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Thanks for making time." I nodded once and sat, brushing a pen off the table's edge. Beside him was Kira Lee, our HR director, already typing on her laptop, like this was a deposition. There was no coffee, no small talk, just a manila folder with my name on it. Connor leaned forward, voice calm, confident like he was practicing empathy, not using it. I'll get right to the point. After reviewing departmental redundancies and strategic focus areas, it's clear we need to pivot away from legacy systems and resource-heavy projects. He said the words like he was discussing the weather. "You've done good work, Evelyn, but we need agility now. We need visionaries who understand the pace of this market." I stared at the Nova Kinetics logo printed faintly on the wall behind him, a neurocircuit branching into a stylized tree. "I created that tree," I said quietly. "It was sketched on a napkin during a symposium in Lisbon, 2014. We based our entire visual branding on it." Connor gave a slight shrug, still smiling. "Branding evolves, like people." He slid the folder toward me. "Your departure package reflects appreciation for your years of service, 6 months of salary, extended health care, and a positive reference should you need one." He said it like he was doing me a favor, like I hadn't built half the company's flagship IP with my own hands. I didn't reach for the folder. I didn't say a word. My mind was already separating noise from signal, something engineering taught me years ago. What mattered now wasn't this room. It was the pattern. 6 months ago, he slashed our R&D budget by 30%. 4 months ago, 2 principal scientists were reorganized out. Last week, I saw the new grant proposal draft and my name was missing from a project I'd led from inception. And now this. Connor was clearing house. Not for innovation, but for convenience. "You're eliminating my role 2 weeks before my final stock options vest," I said, calmly, clearly. The numbers had been part of my subconscious every time I opened my portfolio. Options that were currently valued at just under $290,000. He didn't flinch. "The timing is unfortunate, but coincidental. We make strategic decisions based on operational efficiency, That includes realigning personnel. Realigning that word again. Kira was typing everything, her eyes never meeting mine. The rhythm of her keystrokes was surgical. Connor stood. We've arranged to have your belongings delivered to your home by 5 p.m. today. Your system access was suspended 10 minutes ago. Please let James escort you downstairs. A security guard stepped into the doorway mid-20s, pressed uniform, eyes unsure. Thank you for your cooperation, Ms. Ward, Connor added, and for your past contributions. I stood slowly, keeping my posture even. My name, I said, looking at both of them, is on every Neuropulse prototype since 2016. I'm aware, he replied, but as you know, all work produced within Nova Kinetics is the property of the company. He said that last part like he'd rehearsed it, like he needed to believe it. I walked out without another word. As James followed me through the hallway past the lab glass where I'd stayed late more nights than I could count, I wasn't thinking about vengeance. I wasn't even thinking about grief. I was thinking about my notebooks, the ones I never uploaded, the ones I kept by hand with timestamps, handwritten algorithms, sketches made at 2 a.m. And suddenly, the quiet confidence returned. They could take my badge, they could wipe my email, but they could not delete what they didn't know I still had. The boxes arrived just before sunset. 3 brown cardboard containers, scuffed and slightly dented, sat awkwardly on the floor outside my apartment door. No label, no return address, just silence and cheap tape. I didn't bring them inside right away. I stood there, looking down, the way you look at a package that might explode not from danger, but from memory. Inside those boxes wasn't just office junk. It was 11 years of rituals, of routines, of meaning layered over time. The mug I only used on Thursdays, the framed photo from our first product demo in Berlin, the engineering award they forgot to list on the website, and somewhere, hopefully still intact, my notebooks. I slid the boxes into the apartment one by one and placed them on the dining table. My place was quiet, minimalist except for one wall of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a whiteboard covered in neural mapping sketches. I'd built this space for thinking. Tonight, it would become a crime scene. I opened the first box. The packing was careless. Coffee-stained technical manuals jumbled together with a smashed desk plant. A plaqued innovator of the year 2019 lay face down under a tangle of charging cables. The second box held more personal things, a notepad from the 2017 Neurotech Summit, still dog-eared on the page where I first wrote autonomous synaptic loop recalibration, a Polaroid of me and Judith Lin standing in front of the original Neuropulse prototype, both of us smiling like kids who'd found fire. The third box was heavier. I opened it with both hands. There they were, 5 black moleskin notebooks, held together by a thin elastic strap. I exhaled long, slow, like I'd been underwater. Each notebook held months of handwritten data, initial concept maps, diagrams, flowcharts, code logic sketched at 2 a.m., random inspiration jotted down during commutes or after dreams. Every time I hit a wall in the lab, I returned to those pages like a map, and most importantly, each entry was dated. Every breakthrough, every failure, every pivot that turned Neuropulse from a quirky idea to a market-changing system was written here, in my handwriting, in ink. They hadn't taken these. They couldn't. I sat down and opened the oldest one, its spine cracked from overuse. It was dated January 3rd, 2016. Seattle was cold and rainy today. System prototype is still glitching at response intervals below 0.3 seconds. Need to rethink loop hierarchy. There, it was the seed. I flipped through the pages like flipping through old dreams. Some were messy, others elegant. Some had coffee stains, or tiny post-it notes. All of them had weight. I remembered when the first reliable data set came in, I'd stayed overnight in the lab, eating almonds and listening to Miles Davis until 3 a.m. When the model hit 92% predictive accuracy, I didn't cheer. I just stared at the screen and whispered, "It works." And now, someone who barely understood the system had the audacity to say I was holding the company back. I leaned back in the chair, rubbing the bridge of my nose. I wasn't angry yet. Not fully. Mostly. I was tired. Not physically, mentally. Tired of pretending like excellence would protect you. Tired of watching mediocrity win because it wore better suits and knew how to talk in bullet points. Still, a part of me wavered. Was I making this personal? Was I being naive? Thinking intellectual contribution still mattered in the age of brand-first CEOs and acquisition-minded investors. I opened my laptop and clicked into a secure folder. Ward Dev Logs personal hundreds of entries, all backed up, all time-stamped, not company property, not on Nova Kinetics servers. I began logging the details of the meeting with Connor. Every word I could remember, his phrasing, the timing, the temperature of the room. I wrote it down like I would a lab anomaly, a malfunction that deserved documentation before resolution. At 8:43 p.m., I received a message from Leo Baird, Leo personal email. "Hey, Evelyn, just heard about what happened. This doesn't make any sense. I don't know how much I can say, but something's off. Can we talk outside of work?" "Of course." I stared at the screen. Leo was only a year into the company, a bright automation engineer who still asked questions the rest of us had learned to keep to ourselves. He reminded me of myself. Once, I typed back carefully, "Me not through any Nova Kinetics system. If you want to talk, use personal email only and only off-site." I hit send, then muted my phone. I needed a night of silence because underneath the numbness, something was waking up. Something precise, focused, dangerous. They thought they'd erase me from the system, but I had the source code, and I had all the logs. I met Leo 2 days later, just after 6, at Copper Mug Cafe, a quiet little place a few blocks off the tech corridor where the baristas still hand-poured every cup and remembered your name after the second visit. It was where I used to sketch early neuropulse diagrams on napkins, sticky notes, even the back of receipts. A place where ideas felt safe before they became property. Leo looked nervous when he arrived, hoodie zipped too high, eyes darting toward the glass windows like he was afraid someone had followed him. He wasn't wrong to be cautious. "Thanks for coming," he said, sliding into the booth opposite me. I nodded. "You said something felt off. Tell me." He glanced around again, then leaned in. "They've started pulling all your work from the archives. Not just your folder, everything you touched, emails, drafts, prototypes." I didn't flinch. Leo hesitated. "They've also renamed a few documents, stuff that had your name in the file path. Now it just says R&D Group Archive. Even the Git commits are being reattributed." A quiet breath escaped my lips. I stirred my tea slowly, letting the clinking of ceramic fill the pause. "They're laundering authorship," I said. "Digitally?" Leo's voice dropped. "And they've submitted a provisional patent update. New revision. It doesn't list you at all." There it was. The hit I suspected was coming. It landed with dull certainty. I didn't ask if he was sure. I believed him. Instead, I pulled out my notebook, the second volume, and laid it on the table between us. "March 17th, 2017, I said, flipping open to the page. This was the first time Neuropulse's error margin dropped below 6%. Leo leaned in. My handwriting filled the page's equations, diagram tweaks, time-stamped entries, my initials on test result margins, even a photo stapled inside of me holding the prototype while Judith grinned behind a whiteboard. I documented everything, I said softly. Before they called it valuable? Leo looked stunned. You knew this could happen. No, but I knew that anything powerful enough to change lives could eventually be stolen. That night, back home, I pulled out the hard drive from my fire safe. Encrypted, redundant, off-grid, it contained screen recordings of live model training, timestamps of hardware revisions, draft applications I never submitted, all predating Novakinetic's legal filings by months, sometimes years. What they didn't know was that I'd treated invention like art, and artists keep sketchbooks, artists keep journals. They'd strip my name from a filing, but not from the truth. And now I had to decide what to do with that truth. There's a strange stillness that follows betrayal. It's not rage, not even pain. It's calculation, a quiet sorting of what still belongs to you and what they can never touch again. I spent hours building a timeline of my contributions, not just for Neuropulse, for every project I'd ever prototyped, cross-referencing emails, Slack messages, GitHub commits from private devices, archived lab photos, old text chains, even scribbled Post-it notes. Each piece felt small, alone, unconvincing, but together, they formed a living map, a breathing body of evidence. Not revenge, restoration. I wasn't planning to sue, not yet. I was planning to be undeniable. The next morning, I received an unexpected call. Evelyn Ward. The voice was calm, precise, male. This is Dr. Raj Mehta. I'm a senior examiner with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Do you have a moment to speak privately? I blinked. Yes, of course. We've received 2 provisional filings from Novakinetics involving revised neural AI architecture. I cross-referenced prior art, and your name appeared in 5 citations, but not in the applicant's metadata. That discrepancy triggered a secondary review. My mouth was dry. You saw my name, where, in internal correspondence logs and prior publications you co-authored. He paused. We also found your poster abstract from the 2016 Geneva Conference. Your approach to data retention hierarchy. It directly informs the current Neuropulse revision. He knew, or at least, he was beginning to. I have full documentation, I said, voice steady, handwritten, time-stamped, and backed by lab logs, also screen recordings. I can provide them securely. There was a pause. Then I'd like to schedule a formal interview, off the record, at first. If what you're saying is accurate, this could constitute misattribution under Section 115 of the Patent Act. My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed even. I'll send you the file directory tonight. After I hung up, I stood in the center of my apartment. No music, no motion, just me, and the hum of something turning. I wasn't erased. I was referenced. They forgot that ideas don't disappear just because you delete a name. They forgot that truth, like data, always leaves a trail. And now the system they tried to manipulate was watching back. By the following Tuesday, I was walking through the glass doors of an office that didn't have a single Novakinetics logo anywhere. It was a modest law firm in Cambridge. No marble, no curated artwork, just clean lines, quiet desks, and the soft sound of a printer somewhere down the hall. Evelyn Ward, a voice called softly. A woman approached with confident steps and dark, expressive eyes behind square-framed glasses. Jennifer Walsh, she said, extending a hand. Intellectual property. Raj Mehta sent over your files. I reviewed all 6 folders last night. Twice, we sat in a sunlit conference room filled with actual books, legal reference volumes stacked in quiet order. No touchscreen panels, no AI scribes, just paper and precision. Jennifer didn't waste time. What you've documented, Evelyn, is damning. They didn't just misattribute, they actively scrubbed metadata. That's evidence tampering and in a federally funded lab. That's not just unethical, it's potentially criminal. I nodded once. I'm not interested in vengeance. I'm interested in truth. Jennifer looked at me for a long moment, then nodded back. Good. Because truth is a lot harder to erase than a name. That afternoon, she walked me through the strategy. We wouldn't go straight to court. Not yet. We'd file a preservation request to freeze all version histories on NovaKinetics servers. We'd approach the Office of Research Integrity, since some of the stolen work was federally funded under Judith's grant. And most quietly, we'd open a back channel with the investor board. They may not care about ethics, Jennifer said, but they care about exposure. I stared out the window. The trees were just beginning to bud. Boston slow crawled towards spring. Life pushing through after cold. They called me replaceable, I said aloud, as much to myself as to her. Jennifer's voice was steady. Well, let's replace their narrative. That night, I received an unexpected message on Signal. Amanda Quill, I saw what they filed. I'm so sorry. I thought I had time to stop it. I didn't know they'd push it through without notifying you. Amanda was the last person I expected to hear from. She'd been head of research ops, and while we were never close, she'd always nodded when I passed her in the hallway, the kind of person who notices things but rarely speaks up. I typed back, "Me, I don't blame you, but I need the timestamp on the moment they renamed the Git commit chain for Neuropulse v4. Can you get it?" The typing bubble blinked, then I'll try. They moved the backups, but I kept a local clone before the reorganization. Let me check. I stared at the screen, heart still. Sometimes, resistance doesn't come from speeches. It comes from small, quiet acts of memory. By Thursday, the preservation notice had landed in NovaKinetics' legal inbox. Jennifer CC'd me on the encrypted send. We'll see how fast their PR team scrambles. She was right. By noon, Connor Ray had posted a LinkedIn update about our ongoing commitment to innovation integrity, a hollow paragraph buried between a photo of him at a biotech gala and a quote about agility. I didn't respond publicly, not yet, but I bookmarked the post because what's coming isn't about commentary. It's about correction. 2 days later, Amanda sent me a zip file, inside original Git commit logs unaltered, with my user signature. There it was. Edward 4 Weinstein Town Dev, Edward 5003 Archive, Edward Lassie 9 Loopstab. They hadn't just renamed them, they deleted the original user associations. Except Amanda had quietly cloned the system weeks before. That evidence, Jennifer said, was what we call chain of ownership gold. But even with the growing power behind me, a part of me still hesitated. What if this painted me as difficult? What if the next company Googled my name and saw only conflict? I sat alone at my apartment window that evening, watching a man walk his dog through the rain. Everything in his life, perhaps, still felt simple. I closed my laptop and pulled out the last notebook. I flipped to a page from 2 years ago. I'd written something in the corner. Truth is like a neural net. If you silence one node, the others reroute. The signal always finds a path. Connor had silenced one node, but I was still here. And now, the signal was getting louder. It was nearly midnight when I received a message that didn't come through Signal, email, or any encrypted channel. It was a handwritten letter, folded neatly in a white envelope, no return address, slipped under my apartment door. The handwriting stopped me cold, slanted, deliberate, and unmistakably familiar, like a voice from a former life whispering from paper. Evelyn, I've seen the filings. I've read the version logs. Don't let them gaslight your legacy. Your name is still on the circuit. Judith. I sat down slowly. Judith Lynn, the founding CEO of Nova Kinetics. The woman who hired me. The woman who once stood in front of 100 investors and said, Evelyn Ward's algorithms didn't improve the system. They are the system. Judith had vanished from the public eye 3 years ago after stepping down under health reasons. But this wasn't a ghost writing to me. This was a chess master making her first move. The letter included a phone number and a meeting location. Saturday, noon, a private lab address I recognized. It used to be our first testing facility long before the venture capital came. I arrived early. The building was quiet. No security. Just an old digital keypad. I typed in the passcode she once used for everything, 50 on 30, the electrical resistance of our first working prototype in milliams. It still worked. The elevator creaked to the 3rd floor. I stepped out and saw her older, paler, her hair now fully silver, but still upright with that same steel posture. She didn't smile. Judith rarely did. I figured you'd come, she said, gesturing toward a glass table where a single neurocircuit chip was laid bare under a lamp. The original Neuropulse Pre-Alpha. It's still functional, she added, even without all the corporate polish they slapped on top of it. We sat across from each other in silence for a few moments. 2 engineers who had once believed ideas could outlast politics. They filed for a patent, I said finally. Without attribution. I know, she replied. Connor pitched it to one of my old colleagues as streamlined neural prediction via accelerated feedback loop. He didn't even bother to change the terminology. You still have access to internal communication. Judith nodded. I may be out of the building, but I'm not out of the network. I built the foundation. I still have logs. She reached into a folder and handed me a printed email chain. It was between Connor and the current lead counsel. They discussed removing redundant attributions to simplify ownership. I scanned the lines. There it was clear. Documented intent. They're not just trying to steal it, I murmured. They're trying to erase me from history. Judith looked at me carefully. That's because you were never just a contributor. Evelyn, you were a threat. Not because you were loud, because you were right. We spent the next 2 hours reconstructing the timeline, matching my handwritten notebooks with her archived devlogs and investor correspondence. Piece by piece, we built a counter-narrative. And then she said something I didn't expect. I kept a shadow patent. I blinked. What Judith opened a locked drawer and placed a sealed envelope in front of me. Filed it under a dormant LLC. Not for theft, for protection. I knew if anything ever went wrong, the only thing that would speak louder than funding was prior art. I opened the envelope and found a notarized filing dated 7 years ago with both our names on it. She watched my expression. I didn't tell you then because I didn't want you to second-guess yourself. You were building something honest. I was protecting what would come after. For the first time in months, I felt something rise in my chest that wasn't fear. It was power, quiet, documented, verified, and utterly ours. Later, walking home beneath the early spring rain, I thought about every quiet genius who ever got sidelined, every calm woman in a meeting who got told her tone was too clinical, every scientist whose contributions were renamed, rebranded, and repackaged with someone else's smile. Connor thought he could replace me with someone flashier, someone obedient. But now I had the 2 things every system fears. 1, the truth. 2, a witness. Back in my apartment, I placed Judith's shadow patent beside my notebooks and hard drive. The foundation was set, and the next step wouldn't be private. Monday morning arrived with no alarm. I hadn't slept, but I hadn't needed to. For the first time since my termination, I wasn't reacting. I was initiating. Jennifer had set the board meeting for 9:30 a.m. Investor relations. She called it the kind of meeting that made CEOs sweat and publicists whisper. But I wasn't coming to whisper. The boardroom at Nova Kinetics' downtown office hadn't changed much. Same frosted glass, same chrome chairs, same complimentary scones that no one touched. Except this time, I wasn't at the far end of the table. I was at the center. Connor entered late. Of course he did. He flashed his PR smile, polished, performative, and took the seat opposite me like we were equals. He had no idea what was about to happen. Jennifer nodded once. Then she stood. As counsel for Evelyn Ward, she began. We've requested this emergency review based on significant findings regarding intellectual property attribution. You'll want to pay attention. She tapped her tablet. A mirrored screen lit up behind her. Slide 1. A. Side-by-side comparison of the Neuropulse patent filed last quarter and Evelyn's original 2016 prototype blueprint. Slide 2. Git commit logs with Evelyn's user signature. Redacted versions from current internal repositories. Slide 3. An email from Nova Kinetics' legal counsel discussing removal of redundant attributions. The room fell so silent I could hear the AC humming. Connor cleared his throat. I think we're jumping to conclusions. The current version of Neuropulse is the result of collaborative refinement. Jennifer didn't flinch. Then why does the foundational loop logic still reference Evelyn's 2016 parameter tags verbatim? Connor turned pale. One of the board members, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a gray braid, leaned forward. Is this true? Jennifer tapped again. Up came the notarized shadow patent, dated, signed, and sealed by both Judith Lynn and Evelyn. And then the final blow, a recorded statement. Judith's voice, clear and steady, echoed through the room. When I stepped down, I knew there was risk. But let me be clear. Neuropulse was not a group brainstorm. It was a system born from the mind and labor of Evelyn Ward. Any attempt to erase that truth isn't business strategy. It's theft. The boardroom didn't erupt. It sank into discomfort, into calculation, into long, weighted stares at Connor, who had gone quiet, mouth dry, knuckles tight on the armrest. Finally, the woman with the braids spoke again. I moved to place CEO Ray on administrative review, pending full investigation. A younger man beside her added, and I want a full audit of the legal department's involvement in the patent filing. The votes came fast, one by one. Connor stood up too quickly. This is absurd. She's bitter. She's trying to take down the company out of spite. I stood. For the first time in that building since the day they fired me. No, I said calmly. I'm here to preserve what I built. You tried to replace me. You couldn't. So you tried to erase me. That failed too. Connor stared at me, trembling with rage he didn't know how to hide anymore. And then I walked out, not as an employee, not even as an adversary, as the origin. Downstairs, the air felt different, like Boston had taken a deep breath with me. Jennifer joined me on the sidewalk, hands in her coat pockets. Well, she said, they'll either settle or restructure. I nodded. Either way, I'm free. She gave a half smile. They're going to offer you a position again, maybe even control. I don't want control. I said, I want clarity and room to build again, on my own terms. She paused, considering, and if they license your work moving forward, then they'll pay. I replied, not with credit, with acknowledgement. That evening, I returned to my apartment and made tea. No screens, no tabs open, just silence and steam. I sat down and opened the newest notebook. On the first page, I wrote in neat, black ink, Neuropulse ended here. What comes next begins with my name. A week passed, then two. The headlines came quietly, no dramatic takedowns, no media frenzy, just a few industry outlets noting a leadership transition at Nova Kinetics and the sudden withdrawal of a disputed patent claim. Connor was out. The legal team had been quietly restructured, but I wasn't watching for headlines. I was watching for something quieter, more enduring. My name, where it belonged. On a rainy Wednesday, a letter arrived, certified, from the USPTO. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside a revised acknowledgement, inventor Evelyn Ward, co-author Judith Lynn. Underneath, a note handwritten in the margins from Dr. Rag Mehta. Truth always reasserts itself. Sometimes it just needs documentation. I sat down at the kitchen counter and cried, not from sadness, not from anger, but from the calm release that only justice brings. Not revenge, recognition. Later that week, I received an invitation, not from Nova Kinetics, from MIT, a lecture slot. Topic: resilience in the age of AI when ethics outruns speed. I accepted. That night, I walked through the old testing facility with Judith one last time. The lights buzzed softly overhead. The floor still held faded scuff marks from years of pacing and problem solving. It feels smaller than I remember. I said, "You outgrew it." Judith replied simply. We stood before the original Neuropulse whiteboard. She pulled out a marker and handed it to me. "Go on," she said. I stared at the board, then slowly wrote one word in the corner, assistant. Judith smiled. "I thought you'd write vindicated." "No," I said. "Vindication is external. Persistence is mine." Before leaving, I handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a blueprint not for a product, but a new initiative, an independent neural ethics lab, funded with a portion of the settlement Nova Kinetics had offered not in guilt, but in negotiation. I called it Signal Loop, a place where ideas couldn't be buried, where quiet contributors became co-owners from day one, where being replaceable wasn't even part of the vocabulary. 2 months later, I was on stage, room 4270 MIT. The crowd was young, eager, restless, the kind I used to be before meetings, before betrayals, before someone called me replaceable with a coffee cup still in my hand. I stood calmly, wearing no makeup, no rehearsed branding, just a linen blazer, my old notebook in my bag, and the knowledge that every word I spoke now was mine. I looked out and said I was told I could be replaced, that my work could be attributed to a team, that systems forget people when they're quiet. A pause. But the truth is, systems only survive because of the quiet ones, because of the scribbled margins, the extra hour, the undocumented fix, because of those who stay not for credit, but for clarity. The room was silent, listening, breathing with me. I smiled. They tried to erase a name. Instead, they exposed a legacy. After the lecture, a young woman approached me. She wore a faded hoodie and carried a notebook so full it was bursting at the seams. "Miss Ward," she said shyly, "how do you know when to fight and when to let go?" I looked her in the eyes. "You let go of bitterness. You fight for what made you." She nodded slowly, then asked, "Can I send you something I'm working on?" "Of course," I said. "Just remember timestamp it." Back home that night, I returned to my desk, opened my newest notebook, turned to a blank page, wrote 3 lines. I was never replaceable. I was replicated. But replication without soul is just code. Then I closed the cover and walked away from the desk, not as someone fired, not as someone who won, but as someone who began again. Sometimes the strongest voice in the room is the one that never raised itself. Evelyn Ward didn't shout. She didn't seek revenge. She simply brought the truth documented, time-stamped, undeniable. And in doing so, she reminded us all that brilliance has no gender, that contribution has no volume level, and that calling someone replaceable is not only cruel, it's cowardly. This story isn't just about one woman reclaiming her name. It's about everyone who's ever been overlooked, spoken over, or quietly pushed out simply for being principled, introverted, or unshakably honest. It's a call to listen more closely, to look beneath the polished surface, to ask whose work are we really standing on. If this story moved you, if you've ever been underestimated, erased, or quietly powerful, don't let Evelyn's story stop here. Like this video. If you believe truth matters, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth, and subscribe to our channel for more true stories of resilience, redemption, and quiet revolution. We'll see you in the next chapter.